like you said, because it's a business school, it's modeled a lot along the lines of some of the graduate business schools that you have. So your clubs are very typically like, there's a debating, and I mean, this is a mix of what I've seen in undergrad schools and business schools as well. You have your regular like dance clubs, debating clubs, like social clubs, etc. But then you also have a finance club, consulting club, etc., which are very geared towards just the recruiting side of it or participating in like case competitions and things like that. But I was actually enrolled in the School of Economics, so that was my primary major. And then you can do, because you can do your electives across any of the six schools, you can also pick up a second major across any of the six schools. So finance was the second major that I picked up, but you can do that similarly in psychology, political science, computer engineering, or information systems, as they call it, marketing. So that actually allows you, it is still within the field of business and science overall, but it gives you flexibility as to if you want to do anything outside of your primary major, you can do a second major in that as well, which works quite similar to they call it a double major, but actually it equates to what would be a major and a minor in a US school.
So you graduated and also worked in a financial trading firm for 4 years. So what do you think you actually learned at SMU that was useful? And what obviously industry expects is maybe a lot more than that. And there may be something specific to that industry which is not taught in university.
Yeah.
What did you learn in economics and finance that you could form some sort of a framework to adapt in the work environment that you finally were at?
Yeah, so I mean, I will say that like none of this is stuff that you can't pick up on the job as well, or a lot of it is stuff that it's not like you can't pick up on the job. But I think because I'd done my finance major, at least in the firm that I was at and the role I was in, it was a lot like I had a foundation already in what are the basic financial instruments that I use, forwards, futures, options, etc. How are they valued? What do FX markets work like? What does currency exchange work like? Things like that, which definitely helped me in the role that I was in. Ultimately, it'll obviously come down to what kind of role you're in. But I think the one thing that makes SMU stand out from some of the other Singapore universities, and I would say when compared with something like Delhi University as well, is because it's modeled along the lines of business school, you also do a lot of core classes and classes outside your exact subject area. So, like you do negotiation, you do management communication. So I think in general, like you get a lot of opportunities to work on like your presentation skills, your interview skills and things like that, which was given a lot of emphasis at SMU, which I noticed doesn't usually happen at some of the other Singapore schools. And I think that helps a lot just in terms of, when it comes to applying for jobs, writing your cover letters, writing your resume, or prepping for interviews. It helps a lot with that as well. And even in the workplace, I think just like how you conduct yourself in a team meeting, in a group discussion and stuff, it makes you a lot more comfortable from the get-go, I think.
Fantastic. This is very insightful. For students who are looking for careers in finance, and in your case, you have spent enough time in a very international trading company. So we'd like to know more about what a trader's sort of skill set should be and what are the different career paths within a financial services firm which focuses on that. And then, of course, your current role at Accenture, which is a consulting company. We'll talk
Yeah.
about that as well.
Yeah, so I think at least in my experience, what I notice in trading is a lot of the people who start out there and have spent many years there, it's just kind of like a lifelong job. Like you do it because you love the industry, you love the job, you love the thrill that comes from it, and that's it. And that's kind of what motivated my decision to go to business school as well, was because I wanted to branch out from that and not kind of get siloed into that for the next 10, 20 years. Um, in terms of the skills required, I guess obviously your quantitative skills need to be really good. You need to be a good risk taker and open to taking risks, obviously. And you need to be kind of, I think, very analytical, very detail oriented, and quick to make decisions. Um, Having said that, though, I think people who do it, like I said, they do it for their love of the job and their passion for it, and they're very happy doing that for like 10, 20, 30 years, and they will retire like a trader who's sitting on like years of kind of experience in that commodity or in that space, but never having really seen much of the rest of the world, to put it that way, which is kind of what I didn't want to do. And I think that's where I felt that consulting would give me a much broader exposure. And business school had always been on my mind, and I knew that business school was a good way to kind of try and move to consulting. And that's when and why I decided to apply to business school as well.
Great. So, what were the options in your head? Like, business schools have their own kind of clusters. This school is known for finance, this one's known for general management, this one's for marketing. What were you thinking? And of course, you ended up going to a very coveted one, London Business School. But what were the choices you were making?
Yeah, so that's true for sure. But I would say that I think between finance and consulting, like the top 10, 15 business schools are equal game in those two sectors. There may be some that are stronger for like more niche things like tech or VC or something, but for finance and consulting, like consulting firms hire from the top 10 schools, I think across the board. So the criteria for me became not so much like the specialization of the school, but more like what the school itself is like and where the school is located. And I think by then, obviously, I was a lot more grown up in terms of making these decisions than when I was 17, 18 and going to applying for my undergrad. And I knew that I wanted to be in a city. I didn't want to be in like a small remote town somewhere. So I looked mostly at schools that were in big cities. So even in the US, for example, I looked at U Chicago. I looked at Booth, but I didn't apply to too many schools in the US for that. That was one reason, and the second reason was I was quite clear that I didn't want to stay on and work in the US afterwards. In which case, it didn't really make sense to me to go to the US in the first place. I also felt that London was a city that I really liked, was comfortable with, was similar to Singapore in some ways, but also had like a lot more to offer. And I'd been to LBS again the year I was applying. I really liked the campus, I really liked the area and stuff. And that's why I decided to. So when I got in, so business school typically works a bit differently in the sense that you have like 3 or 4 rounds, and if you're not successful in one, then you can go on to apply to more in the next round. But like when I got into LBS, I decided not to apply to any more schools because I was very happy with that.
Great. And how is it like the curriculum, having done undergrad business and going back to an MBA program? What are the takeaways for a student who's done that, like undergrad and postgrad?
Yeah, I think in terms of the basic curriculum, it is actually quite similar, other than the fact that your electives would be a lot more detailed or a lot more advanced. But if you actually look at the course catalog for the core courses, for example, at SMU versus any business school, it would be quite similar. And I mean, the SMU core curriculum and a lot of the electives are modeled on the Wharton curriculum, so there's obviously no surprise there. But I think the biggest difference is obviously that now you're in a classroom with people with so much experience. You have people with like anywhere from 2 to like 10 years of experience across sectors, across industries, across geographies, especially. And I think that's one thing that makes LBS really stand out and different, is that the classroom is a lot more diverse than any other school. So I think for both LBS and NCR, that's one of the biggest standout factors. Whereas in any US school, you'd have like 40% internationals at best at the MBA level. In LBS and NCR, it's like 90% internationals. So just the cohort and the kind of people you're interacting with is obviously so different, and especially from Singapore, where SMU was majority Singaporeans, about 20% internationals, which is also predominantly Indians and Chinese. So the cohort itself is just so much more international, which makes it a lot more exciting. And then, of course, like the experience that everyone's bringing to the table, because everyone that has worked for several years in different industries. So it's the same classes essentially, but the way you see people, the classes being conducted, the people participating, etc., obviously adds a whole other dimension to it.